We now move to our next session on the topic Culture of the Future, Building Great Places to Work for Driving Business Success. As the world of work undergoes a drastic change into a hybrid era of work, business leaders will need to relook at culture itself and ways to translate it effectively into action. Our speaker for this session is Krishna Raghavan, Chief People Officer, Flipkart. Please give him a big round of applause. I request him to please come up on stage. And while he does, I'll just read a brief introduction on him. Krishna and his team aim to transform Flipkart to be the employer choice by providing an inclusive and entrepreneurial environment through a balance of bespoke and sustainable people practices. Over the last 2 years, in his tenure as Chief People Officer, Krishna has built a strong development, focused and inclusive organization that allows for the best ideas to emerge from anywhere to serve their customers and sellers. Moderating this session is Hema, Regional Director, Human Resource, Lennox India Technology Center. I'd like to invite her onto the stage. Hema has over 26 years of experience in strategic human resources capacity with wide-ranging multinational experiences from Kelly Consultants, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Jain Group of Institutions, I2 Technologies, and Honeywell. She is a leadership coach certified under Cron Ferry Leadership Architects and Marshall Goldsmith, and certified OD facilitator from International OD Federation. We'd like to welcome both of them, and over to you, Hema.
Thank you. Sometimes it's an advantage, Krishna, and I'll tell you why, to go almost towards the very end, because the key points get covered over through all the sessions. And our job becomes easier just to kind of bring it together, and that's what both of us will do. So pleasure meeting all of you here, and I've been hearing it since morning, that it's very refreshing to come back together, meet people, interact with them, shake a hand, have a lunch together. And that's what both Krishna and I aim to do here, our primary purpose being that of culture. If you really look at culture, you know, pre-pandemic, we all leaned on various rituals, symbols, notations that we had in our organizations which represented the culture. And then the 2 years came in, and all of us were left figuring out as to how do we sustain what we created over the past few years. And now, after those 2 years, all of us are here together just trying to imagine what the future holds for us. What a fantastic place to be in. As a professional leadership coach, there can't be an exciting time for me other than the one that we are having here. So Krishna, as we begin, you know, and we had some interesting pre-planning sessions, and there are a lot of commonalities between Krishna and me. We share the same views of life, and that makes this session far more engaging, I would believe. So one of the concepts that this morning, Krishna, that I heard from Adam McMock, and I went back and looked into his page, was about creating graceful organizations. And in his Future for Work, he talks extensively about creating graceful organizations. And this morning, we saw him sharing a few snippets of it. So there are two things that is happening, which is what is bringing all of us and many, many conferences with the same title called as Future of Work. On one end, we have a workforce that is habitually changed. In certain sense, there's permanent change in the need for flexibility, what we just saw here. There's a certainty of uncertainty in itself, which is a paradoxical term, but uncertainty is here to exist, and it's a permanent shift in our lives. We do not know what the future holds for us. There are many global economic and political challenges that will continue to be the unknown variables for each of us as we drive our businesses. That's on one end. On the other hand, we have the changing personality or the changing persona of the new worker. There's a millennial entitled population that's coming into a workforce. Whatever we think is the basic hygiene needs we need to provide for employees by way of compensation, benefits, workplace, all these are baseline. They're all there and have to be done the right way. They're the entitled workforce that's coming in. And that brings the whole tilt, what Krish said, he put purpose right at the top, but when we both discussed, we realized it's no more at the top. It has to start from purpose. And what a better place than Flipkart, where we can hear that story from you, Krishna. Do tell us the story of what does purpose mean to you in your organization, and how do you expose that among your employees?
Well, thank you, Hema, for the wonderful introduction. Pleasure to be here, actually, talking to each one of you and seeing a full room of people after actually a couple of years. So really happy to be here. As you mentioned, I think purpose is really the reason why we exist. And I think of it even at an individual level, as well as an organizational level. So at Flipkart, when we started about 15 years now, we started with the same purpose, which was around transforming commerce through technology. And the endeavor there was to reach 1 billion Indians, because we felt at the time that commerce was accessible only to a small strata of the population. And I'm talking about, obviously, online commerce, right? And I'd like to start with a story which kind of builds on that purpose, the reason why we exist. Very early in our existence, we actually had to obviously ship products to our customers. And we found that the state of supply chain maturity in the country was not there in terms of the kind of customer experience that we wanted to deliver to our customers. And we had two founders in Sachin and Bini who basically had no background in supply chain. And they decided to build an entire supply chain network in the country. And none of them had done it before. None of us had done it before. And today we are in 16,000 pin codes, serving millions of customers. So for us, it really starts with the purpose. And I think organizations need to pay close attention to defining the purpose. And often we make the mistake of making it an intellectual activity, but it actually has to appeal to the emotional side in each one of us. It has to appeal to our inner calling. And when you can actually connect the individual purpose to the company purpose and you can make it happen, truly magic happens, is what we've seen within Flipkart. And there are several stories around it. So I think our biggest learning is craft your purpose very carefully. It has to be relatable to every employee across, irrespective of hierarchy, grade, background. Somebody working in last mile, in the warehouse, the purpose should make sense. It can't be some esoteric, Oxford dictionary language that you use. It has to be relatable. And once you define that, it becomes your guiding light. Often in the company, we have many, many conversations, conflicts, debates, which way to go, this way or that way. And it's always served us in terms of having the purpose in front of us. Why do we exist? And that's really something that's very, very close to our heart.
Absolutely. How many here in this room have actually gone to your leader/manager and says, why should I do this? What is the purpose behind doing this? Any hands are raising? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are a few of them. Let's do this conference a couple of years later, and you will see more hands raising. Because that's what the new generation is about. If you have young children at home, you may already be facing it. Do you think they simply agree to what you ask them to do? They would definitely ask, why am I doing this? What is the purpose behind it? Tell me, why should I do it? All this is the meaning behind what they are seeking, and which is nothing but purpose. So that's something we wanted to bring together. And human beings, right, Krishna, by their own essence, we are all seekers by nature. Unless we have a very strong, compelling need and a compelling desire to understand, we wouldn't engage ourselves wholesomely in an activity that is ahead of us. Which is why purpose is one of the key elements of culture. And for those of you who are struggling to get your workforces back into organizations, try this. Try placing the purpose of why people should be together within organizations to create a great product or a solution. And I'm sure you will find some answers in there. And we'd be happy to share, because at Lennox, we have close to 100% of us back at work. Wow. So we can share some stories around that.
That's amazing.
So just moving on to the second part of our premise around culture, Krishna. which is again creating graceful organizations. There needs to be an ability to sense, an ability to engage, and an ability, more importantly, to create harmony in the organization. And harmony comes from a joint sense of understanding the business, understanding where the business is headed, understanding people, their desires, and their engagement levels. Essentially, we're talking about learning organizations. And I know in the morning there were a couple of speakers who spoke about learning organizations, but I'd like to hear from you. How has Flipkart, using your learnability, your culture of learning, how have you shifted? And what has that done to you as an organization? What has it done to your business?
Yeah, great question, Hema. And Krish touched upon it earlier in the session around the future of work and talked about learning at the center of it as well, right? Amongst the 5 things that he talked about. So the way we think about it at Flipkart is we've kind of mapped it to what we think would make a human being successful in the future, right? And there are 2 mindsets that are very key. One is this aspect around resilience, and a lot has been spoken about resilience, in particular in the last couple of years because of the pandemic. But nobody could have really planned for the pandemic. I don't think if any organization says, yeah, I had a BCP strategy, it was all in place and I just turned it on and it worked, I think that would be far from the truth. So I think at Flipkart, what we've tried to do is to build this mindset by taking very audacious goals. When you take audacious goals and you stretch yourself, many times you reach zones of the unknown. Like you've not faced those problems before. There are no solutions at present and you don't know how to solve for them, right? And then what happens is the resilience mindset kicks in. It's not a muscle that can be actually grown overnight. It's something that has to be trained. So we lay great emphasis on audacity as a value and taking stretch goals as a competence. And we tie both these very closely in all our people practices from an assessment standpoint, especially at the leadership level. So that's something that we build very much into the fabric of learning. And the second is the growth mindset, which I'd like to also speak about. We lay great emphasis on a competence around self-awareness. So finally, we all are placed in situations and nobody's perfect. I have many, many development areas sitting right here. And do I first recognize that? So if it starts with self-awareness, I start from a place where I recognize it and then I'm able to build on it. And how much are you investing in your learning becomes a very big part of taking that learning journey forward. So these 2 aspects we lay a lot of emphasis on, and the way we try to create an environment that caters to it is we encourage talent mobility actively in the company. So for instance, myself, I was playing a technology role in Flipkart for the last 8 years prior to the role I'm just taking. So we take very, very sort of diverse backgrounds and we actually push them into boundaries that they've never been pushed before. So that's something that we do, and we just recently launched an internal talent marketplace as well, which basically says you might be in a role, but you can pick up any experience from anywhere in the company. You could be working in finance and you can pick up an HR project and you can just sign up for it. So that's something that we lay great emphasis on.
I like the fact that you brought about self-awareness, and I thought this whole period of 2 years has actually shown us how much of vulnerability we as leaders need to demonstrate. And I'm sure all of you, those of you who are in leadership positions, would have found yourself many times over the last 2 years having no answers to the situations or to the issues that you were facing. And very often those very answers were lying somewhere around among your colleagues and someone as young as, coming just fresh out of campuses. This sense of vulnerability, this sense of saying, I do not know, is a huge leap in leadership development and a huge leap in self-awareness. And I can't agree with you as to how important that composition is towards creating a graceful organization. Now, I kept mentioning graceful a couple of times, so I want to go and do a little deep dive there for you. It is a need of the hour today that we in organizations, in order to attract the right kind of talent, need to create the right environment. We have deliberated that enough over the last few hours. But to create that, there are a few things. One is organizations need to have the ability to sense. Keep your ears closer to the ground. Two, the ability to develop simplest solutions. You know, a marketplace like what he said for talent. Simple solutions which are not complex, easy to understand, keeping your structures very simple so communications are flowing in a manner that it's very fluidic in nature. And finally, the ability to act with ease and harmony, or ease and balance, which is to make sure your purpose is kind of flowing right through the organization. These are some elements that we wanted to bring out here in the form of culture, and we're very aware that there's a time ticking off here. We have about 5 minutes ahead of us, and we'd like to take some questions if you have, or your own thoughts. You could even debate with us, not what all we say is the right thing. If you dispute with us, you should clearly state it. But we'd like to take in some questions or some comments. There's one there. Yeah. Sorry?
Can we pass on a mic in case?
Yeah. Can you pass it?
We can't hear you well, so.
There's some feedback coming this area. I think it's not working.
Now it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned about purpose and aligning the purpose with it, but how much the millennials can really come to the purpose of the company, or do we need to really understand their purpose and align with the company, or how it has to be? Because it's, it's very difficult for, young persons to understand about the purpose of the organization.
Yeah, I think we got the question. You want to take that?
Yeah. So, I think we probably underestimate the current population. I've met so many people across various companies, not just in mine. I think maybe they don't talk about it in the same language that we do, but as Hema put it so beautifully, the why is invariably asked. And I'll just give you an example in terms of when we did an experiment at Flipkart where we were able to actually connect the overall company strategy and break it down into its constituents to each team, what each team is building to that strategy, and make that connection very strong, very explicit. The productivity of that team towards the objective that we were seeking actually increased about 150%. Because people understood it was not about and in engineering parlance, people were not just working on a sprint, a bug, a feature, but they knew exactly why this feature is getting built and what is it driving at a company purpose level. So when you make that connection very evident, I think truly the resonance is much, much higher in the employee base.
Another thing I've always experienced, as a leader myself is, when you tell your colleagues what they need to do, the resonance is much lower, as opposed to when you ask them if they can do it and how well they can do it. So asking versus telling is a, is a skill that that kind of helps us to enhance the purpose. Because when people know why they have to do, you don't need to do anything else. It's just a flow. The organization just flows. And that's what all of us need to aspire, I would believe so.
You do a pilot and you'll probably find.
Hi, I'm Donna. My question is more on...
okay, back there, sorry.
My question is more on the reskilling part. So a lot of our employees, especially if you look at the Gen Z population, like how we do not have an organization for life concept, we are also more moving towards not a single career path for life. We might have very different choices. For example, if I'm in HR today, I might want to become a Salesforce developer tomorrow. So internally, while we do all these programs for our colleagues, how do we position it with the customers? How important it is for the customers also to understand about the learning culture that we bring in the organization? So your thoughts or views?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Ultimately, what you do internally in an organization also has to reach business results. And I think that's how it makes it sustainable. I mean, otherwise you do it in theory, right? I'll give you an example which is in the industry also. So AI, ML, data science, we talk about it a lot now in all spheres. In any domain you take it, it's talked about. Do you know that data science ultimately is learning based on the models and the data that you feed it? And if you have biases in the data that you feed, data science is going to spit out biased results. Now, how do you get biases into data? It's because of your backgrounds. We all have biases. If you have people from different backgrounds feeding in data, from cross-functional skill sets, you can imagine how better the model delivers. I think just as an example, if you talk about this to a customer, you can just think about the power that the customer will feel because your organization has a learning culture at the heart of it. I just try to connect the dots in terms of business outcomes, but thought it was a relevant example to share.
Hope that helped.
Did that help? Back there? Okay.
Hello. Hi.
Yes.
I have a very short question to ask. I am Piyush and I am co-founder of Bridge Tech. We talk about purpose here, right? That we have to explain the purpose to the guys. How do we explain this to the guys who are about to leave, and why do the organizations have to go for 3 months of notice period explaining it to millennials?
All right, there are two questions that you have inbuilt in that one question. So how do we explain? So I think, purpose flows both ways, right? There is an organization's need to have an individual perform a certain job. And then there is an individual's aspiration to what he or she wants to do out of their lives and out of their journey. Now, how do we align both of this? The only most effective way to do is to have conversations with individuals. Now, very often as we are focused on driving business growth, we very less often focus on what is the effective span that an individual leader can manage, because there's only that many conversations that you can have effectively with people who are working with you. We very often, I'm going back to basics, I'm going back to our MBA books where we were taught how structure should be created and how span of management is a very important input to driving organization cultures. Conversations are a very important and an integral element to drive purpose. Now you're connecting it with when people are leaving. The moment an individual has decided to leave, there is a process that individual goes through. It's not an overnight decision. It starts almost, typically in every case, about 3 to 4 months ahead before they finally drop in their papers. I can see so many faces nodding here in agreement. And that's the truth. That's how the human mind processes, especially if you've been in organizations for some time. Because you're validating a lot of theories, a lot of inputs that you're getting from both your new employer and your old employer, and you're cross-validating it. Conversations are the only ways that you can bridge that gap. Now, conversations need to also go with your ability to read your group, to read your people. In yoga, and I'm sure Krishna will identify, they says the lips can speak a certain language, but your body speaks the truth. As leaders, are you able to watch your people very closely and understand their emotional needs much before they actually put it into words? Because what they put into words are just 1/4 of what they experience actually. So I don't know whether I'm connecting the dots for you, but essentially it's conversations that help in engagement, conversations that help in bind, and good conversations need a lot of leadership, time being devoted to it. So if leaders are managing businesses, then how much of their time is to manage people? And that ratio has to be equal according to me. Yeah. I don't know how you feel about it.
You summed it up perfectly, so nothing further to add.
Right, we are right on time, so we hand it back. Thank you so much. We enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you, Hema and Krishna, for that engaging session.